Ancient Egyptian textile production was one of the most sophisticated and highly valued crafts in the ancient world, and created fabrics that were coveted by royalty and wealthy merchants throughout the Mediterranean region. Egyptian linen was renowned for its exceptional quality, softness, and durability, making it a luxury item that was often used as currency in international trade. Agreements. Egyptian flax cultivation began with careful selection of the best growing areas along the Nile River, where rich alluvial soil provided ideal conditions for producing high-quality fiber. Farmers planted flax seeds in the cooler months when flooding had deposited fresh nutrients in the fields. The timing of planting was crucial because flax required specific temperature and moisture conditions to produce the finest fibers. Ancient Egyptian flax harvesting was a labor-intensive process that required skilled workers who understood how to extract the longest possible fibers from each plant. Workers pulled the entire flax plant from the ground rather than cutting it, which preserved the full length of the valuable fibers. This method produced superior linen but required significantly more effort than conventional harvesting techniques. Egyptian flax processing involved multiple stages that transformed raw plant material into usable textile fibers through a combination of natural decomposition and mechanical manipulation. The harvested flax was first dried in the sun, then soaked in water for several weeks to allow bacteria to break down the pectins that bound the fibers to the woody stem. Material. Ancient Egyptian retting pools were specially constructed basins where flax stalks were submerged in stagnant water to encourage controlled decomposition. The process required careful monitoring because insufficient retting left the fibers difficult to separate, while excessive retting could damage the fiber quality. Skilled workers could determine the proper timing by examining the color and texture of the soaking flax. Egyptian fiber extraction began after the retting process was complete and involved breaking the woody stems to separate the valuable linen fibers. Workers used wooden tools called break bars to crack the brittle stem material without damaging the delicate fibers within. This step required considerable skill and experience to achieve optimal results. Ancient Egyptian scutching was the process of scraping away broken stem pieces to reveal the clean linen fibers underneath. Workers used curved knives made of wood or bone to carefully remove all plant debris while preserving the integrity of the fiber bundles. The quality of scutching directly affected the grade and value of the finished linen. Egyptian fiber combing, known as heckling, used increasingly fine combs to separate and align the individual linen fibers into parallel bundles suitable for spinning. Coarse combs removed any remaining plant material and shorter fibers, while fine combs created smooth, lustrous fiber that could be spun into the highest quality. Thread. Ancient Egyptian spinning transformed combed flax fibers into thread using simple but effective tools that had remained essentially unchanged for thousands of years. Egyptian spinners used drop spindles made of wood and clay to twist fibers into continuous thread while maintaining consistent thickness and strength throughout. The spinning process. Egyptian thread quality varied significantly, depending on the grade of flax used and the skill of the spinner, with the finest thread requiring exceptional expertise and commanding premium prices in both domestic and international markets. Master spinners could create thread so fine that finished linen was nearly transparent and suitable only for the most prestigious garments. Ancient Egyptian weaving was performed on horizontal ground looms that could produce fabric of various widths and patterns, depending on the intended use and desired quality level. Weavers worked in organized workshops where experienced craftsmen supervised apprentices and maintained consistent standards for different grades of linen production. Egyptian loom construction used locally available materials and represented thousands of years of technological development and refinement. The basic design consisted of wooden beams that held the warp threads in proper tension while allowing weavers to interlace weft threads to create finished fabric with the desired characteristics. Ancient Egyptian weaving patterns ranged from simple plain weaves used for everyday clothing to complex, decorative patterns reserved for ceremonial garments and burial shrouds. Skilled weavers could create intricate designs by varying thread colors and weaving techniques, producing textiles that were both functional and aesthetically pleasing. Egyptian fabric finishing involved several processes that enhanced the appearance and durability of newly woven linen through careful treatment with various natural substances. Finished cloth was often bleached in the sun to achieve the brilliant white color that was highly prized by Egyptian consumers and international traders. Ancient Egyptian garment construction reflected both practical needs and social conventions that dictated appropriate clothing for different classes of society and various occasions. Basic garments were simple rectangular pieces of linen that were wrapped, tied, or pinned to create functional clothing that provided protection from sun and sand. Egyptian clothing styles evolved slowly over thousands of years but maintained certain characteristic features that distinguished Egyptian fashion from clothing worn in other ancient civilizations. The preference for white linen, simple geometric shapes, and minimal ornamentation created a distinctive aesthetic that emphasized the quality of the fabric rather than elaborate decoration. Ancient Egyptian royal garments represented the pinnacle of textile craftsmanship and often incorporated the finest linen available along with imported materials and precious ornaments. Pharaohs and high officials wore specially commissioned clothing that demonstrated their wealth, power, and connection to the gods through the use of sacred symbols and colors. Egyptian textile workshops employed hundreds of skilled artisans who specialized in different aspects of cloth production and garment construction, creating an efficient system that could meet the demands of both domestic consumption and international export. These workshops were often attached to temples or royal palaces and operated under strict supervision. Ancient Egyptian textile trade networks extended throughout the ancient world and made Egyptian linen one of the most sought-after luxury goods in international commerce. Egyptian merchants exchanged fine textiles for precious metals, exotic materials, and other goods that could not be produced locally, establishing Egypt as a dominant force in Mediterranean trade. Egyptian clothing regulations reflected social hierarchies and religious beliefs that governed appropriate dress for different classes and occasions, with specific colors, fabrics, and styles reserved for particular groups within society. These regulations helped maintain social order while ensuring that clothing choices reflected proper respect for Egyptian cultural values and traditions. Ancient Egyptian arts and crafts represented one of the most sophisticated and enduring artistic traditions in human history and produced works of beauty and functionality that continue to inspire admiration. Thousands of years after their creation, Egyptian artisans developed techniques and aesthetic principles that remained remarkably consistent across millennia while adapting to changing materials and cultural influences. Egyptian pottery production was a fundamental craft that provided essential household items for people of all social classes and created vessels that were both functional and decorative. Egyptian potters used locally available clay from the Nile River banks, which contained the perfect mixture of minerals and organic matter needed to produce durable, attractive ceramics. Ancient Egyptian pottery wheels were operated by foot power and allowed skilled craftsmen to create perfectly symmetrical vessels with smooth surfaces and consistent wall thickness. The potter's wheel was a revolutionary technology that dramatically increased production speed and quality while enabling the creation of complex shapes that would have been impossible using hand-building techniques alone. Egyptian ceramic decoration employed a variety of techniques, including painted designs, carved patterns, and applied ornaments that reflected both artistic preferences and religious symbolism. Common decorative motifs included geometric patterns, plant and animal forms, and hieroglyphic inscriptions that often carried protective or religious significance for the vessel's intended use. Ancient Egyptian metalworking represented one of the most advanced metallurgical traditions in the ancient world and produced tools, weapons, jewelry, and ceremonial objects that demonstrated exceptional skill and technical knowledge. Egyptian smiths worked with copper, bronze, silver, and gold using techniques that had been refined through generations of craftsmen. Egyptian goldworking reached extraordinary levels of sophistication and created jewelry and decorative objects that showcased both technical mastery and artistic vision. Egyptian goldsmiths could produce incredibly fine wire, create complex granulation patterns, and fashion delicate ornaments that required exceptional skill and specialized tools to manufacture. Ancient Egyptian bronze casting used sophisticated techniques, including lost wax casting, to create complex, three-dimensional objects with fine details and smooth surfaces. Bronze workers could produce everything from small personal ornaments to large ceremonial vessels and statues that required careful planning and execution to achieve successful results. Egyptian carpentry and woodworking utilized both local and imported materials to create furniture, tools, building components, and decorative objects that demonstrated exceptional craftsmanship and understanding of wood properties. Local woods included acacia and sycamore, while expensive imported woods like cedar and ebony were reserved for the most prestigious projects. Ancient Egyptian furniture construction employed sophisticated joinery techniques, including dovetail joints, mortise and tenon connections, and complex interlocking systems that created strong, durable pieces without relying on metal fasteners. Egyptian carpenters understood wood grain patterns and seasonal movement, allowing them to create furniture that remained stable for centuries. Egyptian stone carving represented perhaps the most impressive demonstration of ancient craftsmanship and produced monuments, statues, and architectural elements that continue to amaze visitors with their precision and beauty. Egyptian stoneworkers used both hard and soft stones, developing specialized techniques for each material type. Ancient Egyptian granite working required exceptional skill and patience because granite is one of the hardest stones available and could only be shaped using equally hard abrasive materials and persistent effort. Egyptian granite workers created obelisks, sarcophagi, and architectural elements that required years of careful work to complete. Egyptian limestone carving was more common than granite work, because limestone was softer and more readily available throughout Egypt, making it the preferred material for most building projects and decorative elements. Limestone workers could achieve fine details and smooth finishes that enhanced the architectural and artistic impact of their creations. Ancient Egyptian painting and decoration followed strict artistic conventions that governed color choices, proportional relationships, and symbolic content, while allowing individual artisans to demonstrate personal skill and creativity. Egyptian painters worked on various surfaces, including walls, wood, papyrus, and ceramic, adapting their techniques to each material. Egyptian pigment preparation involved grinding mineral and organic materials to create stable, long-lasting colors that have retained their brilliance for thousands of years. Common pigments included red and yellow ochre, carbon black, white chalk, and more exotic materials like lapis lazuli for creating the prized blue colors. Associated with divinity, ancient Egyptian papyrus making was a specialized craft that transformed the fibrous pith of papyrus plants into writing material that was exported throughout the ancient world. Papyrus makers worked in organized workshops where they could control quality and maintain consistent production standards for different grades of writing material. Egyptian papyrus production involved harvesting papyrus plants from marshes along the Nile, cutting the stems into manageable lengths, and carefully peeling away the outer layers to expose the inner pith that would be processed into writing sheets. The timing of harvest and processing was crucial for producing high-quality papyrus. Ancient Egyptian leatherworking provided essential materials for clothing, containers, tools, and military equipment, while developing techniques for tanning, dyeing, and decorating animal hides. Egyptian leatherworkers understood how to process different types of animal skins to achieve the desired characteristics for specific applications. Egyptian basket weaving used locally available materials, including palm fronds, reeds, and grasses, to create containers, storage vessels, and household items that were both functional and attractive. Basket makers could create complex patterns and shapes while maintaining the structural integrity needed for practical use. Ancient Egyptian textile dyeing employed both plant and mineral dyes to create colored fabrics that enhanced the natural beauty of Egyptian linen, while providing variety and personal expression in clothing and household textiles. Egyptian dyers understood how to achieve consistent colors and prevent fading through proper preparation and application techniques. Egyptian jewelry making represented one of the most refined artistic traditions in ancient Egypt, and created ornaments that combined aesthetic beauty with religious and magical significance. Egyptian jewelers worked with precious metals, gemstones, and colorful materials to create pieces that reflected the wearer's status and spiritual beliefs. Ancient Egyptian glassmaking developed later than other crafts, but quickly achieved high levels of sophistication and produced vessels, beads, and decorative objects that demonstrated mastery of this challenging medium. Egyptian glassmakers could create complex colors and patterns while maintaining the structural integrity needed for functional objects. Egyptian workshop organization followed well patterns that ensured efficient production while maintaining quality standards and training new generations of craftsmen. Most workshops were associated with temples, palaces, or wealthy private individuals who provided materials, tools, and market connections needed for successful operation. Ancient Egyptian evening routines marked the transition from the productive activities of daylight hours to the peaceful rest and spiritual contemplation that characterized Egyptian nights. As the sun began its journey toward the western horizon, Egyptian families prepared for the evening meal, religious observances, and social activities that brought communities together after the day's work. Egyptian sunset rituals acknowledged the daily journey of Ra, the sun god, as he traveled across the sky in his solar bark before entering the underworld for his nightly battle against the forces of chaos. Many Egyptians paused in their evening activities to offer prayers and thanks for the day's blessings while requesting protection during the vulnerable hours of darkness. Ancient Egyptian evening meals were typically the most substantial food consumption of the day and provided an opportunity for families to gather, share news, and strengthen social bonds. The evening meal often included bread, vegetables, fruits, and when available, meat or fish that had been prepared throughout the day using traditional cooking methods. Egyptian food preparation for evening meals began in the late afternoon, when family members worked together to prepare ingredients, tend cooking fires, and arrange serving areas. Cooking was typically done outdoors or in well-ventilated areas to avoid filling living spaces with smoke, and families often shared cooking facilities with neighbors in communal courtyards. Ancient Egyptian dining customs emphasized communal eating and social interaction, with family members and guests sitting together on mats or low stools arranged around shared dishes. Meals were eaten primarily with the hands, though spoons made of wood or pottery were used for liquids and soft foods that could not be easily managed otherwise. Egyptian evening conversations covered topics ranging from daily work experiences and community news to religious discussions and storytelling sessions that entertained family members while preserving cultural traditions. Elders often used evening gatherings to pass down historical knowledge, moral teachings, and practical wisdom to younger generations. Ancient Egyptian oil lamps provided illumination for evening activities and created a warm, flickering light that extended the useful hours of each day while consuming relatively small amounts of fuel. Oil lamps were typically made of pottery and burned various types of oil, including olive oil, sesame oil, and animal fats that produced steady flames. Egyptian lamp maintenance required daily attention to trim wicks, refill oil reservoirs, and clean soot deposits that could reduce light output and create unpleasant odors. Well-maintained lamps could provide several hours of usable light, enabling families to continue productive activities after sunset, including textile work, food preparation, and social gatherings. Ancient Egyptian evening entertainment included music, dancing, games, and storytelling that provided relaxation and social bonding after the physical demands of daily work. Musical instruments such as harps, flutes, and percussion instruments were common in Egyptian households and provided accompaniment for singing and dancing. Egyptian board games like Senet were popular evening pastimes that combined entertainment with religious symbolism, as the game was believed to represent the soul's journey through the afterlife. Game pieces and boards were found in tombs throughout Egypt, indicating the importance of these activities in both daily life and spiritual preparation. Ancient Egyptian evening hygiene practices included washing hands, feet, and faces with water that had been warmed over cooking fires, using natron salt for cleansing, and applying oils and perfumes to protect skin from the dry desert climate. Personal cleanliness was considered both a practical necessity and a religious obligation. Egyptian clothing care occupied part of the evening routine as family members inspected garments for damage, performed repairs, and arranged clean clothing for the following day. Linen garments were shaken out, folded carefully, and stored in wooden chests or pottery vessels to protect them from insects and moisture. Ancient Egyptian sleep preparation involved arranging bedding materials, including woven mats, linen sheets, and headrests that elevated the head to provide comfort and protect elaborate hairstyles from disturbance. Sleeping areas were often located on rooftops during hot weather to take advantage of cooling breezes. Egyptian bedroom arrangements varied according to social status and available space, with wealthy families occupying separate sleeping chambers while common people often shared multi-purpose rooms that served for sleeping, storage, and daily activities. Privacy was achieved through portable screens or curtains made of linen or red matting. Ancient Egyptian night security measures included securing doors and windows, banking cooking fires to prevent accidental blazes, and ensuring that valuable possessions were properly stored and protected. Night watches were sometimes organized in communities to guard against theft or other dangers that might threaten sleeping. Families. Egyptian spiritual evening practices included prayers to protective deities, recitation of magical spells for safety during sleep, and placement of amulets or sacred objects near sleeping areas to ward off evil influences. Many Egyptians believed that sleep made them vulnerable to supernatural threats that required divine protection. Ancient Egyptian dream interpretation was considered an important aspect of spiritual life, and many people paid careful attention to their dreams as sources of divine communication and prophecy. Dream interpreters were consulted when particularly vivid or troubling dreams occurred, and dream content was often incorporated into daily decision-making processes. Egyptian night sounds included the calls of nocturnal birds, the movement of wind through palm fronds, the distant sounds of the Nile River, and the occasional noise of animals or night workers moving through darkened streets. These familiar sounds provided comfort and security for sleeping families. Ancient Egyptian dawn preparation began in the pre-dawn hours, when early risers would rekindle fires, prepare morning meals, and begin daily activities before the heat of the sun became uncomfortable. The cycle of Egyptian daily life followed natural rhythms that had remained essentially unchanged for thousands of years. Egyptian seasonal variations in evening routines reflected the changing patterns of daylight hours, agricultural demands, and weather conditions that influenced daily activities throughout the year. Flood season evenings differed from harvest season evenings, and winter nights required different preparations than summer nights. Ancient Egyptian community evening activities included festivals, religious celebrations, and seasonal observances that brought together extended families and neighborhoods for shared cultural experiences. These gatherings strengthened social bonds and reinforced cultural values that maintained Egyptian civilization across millennia. Egyptian night economy included activities that continued after dark, such as baking bread for morning markets, night fishing on the Nile, security patrols, and emergency services that ensured community safety and productivity. Some crafts and trades operated continuously to meet the constant demands of Egyptian society. Ancient Egyptian evening reflections often included contemplation of the day's accomplishments, gratitude for divine protection and provision, and preparation for the spiritual journey of sleep that was understood as a temporary rehearsal for the final journey to the afterlife that awaited all Egyptians.